Hello everyone, my name is Alessandro Baldasseroni and I'm lead character artist at NVIDIA. In this video I want to show you a quick way to pose your characters for presentation purposes. So basically pose your character like this in a simple contrapposto pose. And the assumption is that we're going to start from a typical production model in T-pose. It's the typical production model that is used for I don't know, like cinematics, video games, or whatever. It has a T-pose, symmetrical ones, and obviously is ready for rigging. And of course, we are running under the assumption that we don't have a rigging in any other like 3D application, either like Maya or Max. So this is a very generic way of actually posing the character for your presentation stills, And we're gonna use the ZBrush transpose master. It's very simple to use, it's very intuitive. It's sort of like destructive, but if you use if you plan your things like accordingly, it's not too bad. So this model is composed of a lot of different subtools, as you can see here. It doesn't really matter because when we're going to use transpose master, it's going to basically merge all of these objects into one single mesh. So this is like very generic, pretty generic situation when it comes to posing something. What we want to do, as we said, is like contrapposto pose, which basically means that all the weight of your character is basically carried on almost on one single joint, which is this one. This leg is basically carrying all the weight of the body, and you have this typical asymmetry, especially in the torso. So you have like the hip going in one direction and the shoulder going the other one, and everything else pretty much follow accordingly. We're not gonna match this one one to one, but at least the principle of having the character carrying his weight on one hip, that we're gonna achieve for sure. So let's get going. So first thing to do is to go to transform, Z plugin, transpose master, transpose to mesh. So it's gonna take a little bit, and it's trying to merge everything together in one single mesh. Yeah, this object definitely has a lot of subtools. Hope it's not going to be the case for yours, but anyway. One thing to say just to begin is that with Control Shift and left click, you can actually hide elements in the forms of subtools. So whenever you need to hide something, you just press Control Shift, and you can isolate easily the part of mesh that you want. So first thing I do is to obviously try to put the weight, as I said, the weight of the character on one joint. So let's hide this mesh. I really like to work with the mask lasso. It really gives me a lot of accuracy. And again, these are sort of hard surfaces, so I'm gonna be loose. If you want more accuracy, you need more time, but generally speaking, this is the way I operate. So first thing, guys, I'm gonna do is to actually rotate this leg. So ankle needs to follow. And also what you want to do, since this leg is carrying all the weight, it should be a little bit more retracted. So let's try to rotate it a bit on the back. And consequently, This is gonna move a little bit forward. See, like an example, in this case, I should be more careful here because obviously this is a hard surface part, so it shouldn't deform. So that means that probably I should isolate this piece a little bit better. But for this purpose, for the purpose of this like exercise, we're gonna be a little bit loose when it comes to that. Okay, so let's assume that this like leg here is in place. Now we need everything else to follow accordingly, which means that basically the whole body is supposed to rotate and going in this direction, slightly, you know, slightly oblique, starting from this joint here. But before doing that, I would recommend, if you can, to actually pose the fingers, because otherwise, now we still have symmetry. If we start like to rotate the torso, we're gonna lose symmetry on the arms, which can be, you know, quite time-consuming after if you want to pose the, you know, pose the fingers. So right now we still have symmetries for them, and we can attempt to quickly give a more natural pose to the actual fingers. I can do it like in a very like quick, loose way, which is this. Okay, didn't have like symmetry activated. So let's do this. Let's isolate only the hands. High point. Now all I have is the hands visible. Let's hide this one for a second. And now I can finally start rotating things around. Here I'm being very loose, so this part shouldn't deformate like this. If you want to have more control, you can definitely, an example, take this piece, hide it, and then rotate everything so that piece is not in the way, an example. But you should be doing it for every like piece that basically stays on the joint. You can do this, and then when you're happy, you basically hide the piece back, you know. But for this purpose, we're gonna be a little bit more loose, but you got the idea that definitely if you want a clean job, you have to hide and unhide pieces a lot. So let's start to rotate this. I'm basically just using the basic tools of the transpose master. Really nothing more fancy than this. As you can see, I'm being quite loose. If I had to do this for like a sculpture or a maquette, I would be way more accurate than I'm now. If you press like Ctrl and click on the mesh multiple times, obviously it blurs the mask. So you have like a more soft transition and deformation clearly. Good thing to do when you have a situation like this would be to actually isolate the mesh that you have below, deform the mesh that you have below, and then put like manually all these pieces on top, back on top. So this way, basically, these pieces won't be deformed, because now I'm slightly deforming them with this like method of selection. So keep in mind that's probably the best approach. This is something that happens with hands in general, that when they are in a resting position, they tend to curl a little bit on themselves. So I would recommend to rotate this part a little bit like this. There is a loss of like volume, generally speaking. And of course, like, I'm not taking references at the moment, so this pose, especially when it comes to the end, probably is not going to be the most natural ever, but I strongly recommend you to take references. It just gives a lot of more like naturalism. I have a vague idea, actually a little bit more than a vague idea of what I'm doing, but I'm not really taking any specific reference right now, so this just comes out of experience and me doing this for quite some time. But it's basically the fingers curling on themselves in a more or less natural way. Yeah, this is a lot of like loss of volume that you can totally avoid if you are more accurate with the selections. But this is a very particular case when you have layers of geometry on top of your fingers. If you have like a normal hand or a glove, it's not that, you know, complicated. Yeah, I'm being a little bit picky about this stuff right now. Just okay. Let's say this is fair enough. So now we can remove the symmetry, and then we can keep going to pose everything else. So we said that basically the weight of the character is on this point. So consequently, I would expect everything else to basically rotate to a certain degree. What we want to achieve is basically this kind of like, you know, angularity here on the axis of the waist. So I assume that something like this would be enough. I'm eyeballing it, of course. And now what we want to do is to select this leg and pull it out. Just always be sure that your transpose line actually fall on the joints, more or less on the position of the joints. Also, this leg should move forward a little bit, and you probably want also this to bend to a degree. And then you can definitely play even with the angle. So now it's like straight, but as you can see, if you play with this control here in the middle, you can definitely give a torsion to the leg. And then you can, like, you know, finesse. Yeah, this is like one of the areas where you want to be more careful. It's tricky here because there are those parts that are like kind of like hard surface, so it's not so easy to make something that looks like correct. In terms of deformation. And of course, sometimes you have situations like this where you can definitely jump in manually and try to fix some obvious nasty deformations. This stuff happens all the time, especially when you go fast. Anyway, so what we want to do now is probably take care of the rotation of the torso. So as you can see from this reference here, we need to have the higher portion of the torso, like, you know, basically oriented in a different way, in an opposite way. So I truly recommend here to be very careful to try to get something harmonic and not to exaggerate too much. Otherwise, of course, like, the head needs to counterbalance. then you can use like the center to actually rotate the head on its proper axis. And then it's time to rotate the arms. This is a typical example where this piece here is on the way, so I'm gonna hide them for now. I could have in one go put the arm down before when they had the symmetry. Now it's gonna take a little bit more time, but it's not too bad when it comes to the arms compared to the fingers. It's okay to have a little bit of penetration. We can definitely fix this kind of stuff later. Just try to have like the arms falling down naturally, giving them some sense of gravity. And again, take a lot of references as much as possible. And then finally we can unhide these pieces here. Really, it's all a matter of like isolating the parts that you need and trying to, you know, to have an easy life when it comes to deforming things around. And you can always like cheat, you know, you can always like, you know, pushing and pulling vertices when you have situations like in this case where things are like penetrating and it will take forever to actually properly place. Yeah, it's not too bad. I'm just gonna be sure that the threshold here is not too big. And I would say that we are pretty much done here with the contrapose to pose. The next step is to obviously go out of the transpose buster. I'm really afraid that it's gonna crash, but let's give it a try. Hope it doesn't, otherwise it's pretty much done. Let's see. ZBrush is basically assigning to each single subtool right now the new pose basically that we just created. yeah, in this case I have a lot of subtools. It's almost done, luckily. Okay, so nothing bad happened. So what we can do is like hide this, and right now you are pretty much ready to either export these pieces into Maya, morph back, or to actually go to Keyshot, or if you want you can even like render here in ZBrush. What I like to do sometimes is like maybe like doubling my document and then anti-aliasing elf, and then just drop my renders here on the canvas. I usually like, you know, a 3/4 front, 3/4 back, and maybe a side. So something like this. This doesn't really matter. And if you want, you can also do like I like this pose a lot. I don't have space here, but something from the top maybe. And then maybe you wanna increase like the number of rays here to 150, and I still really like the best renderer, ZBrush. It gives like this nice pass of somehow fake GI, and then you can export this as a PSD or whatever. Solver. There you go, and you have your sample stills. Or you can do the same thing, but pretty much using Keyshot. Hope this somehow helped to present your model in a sort of like, you know, natural way through a contrapposto pose. Thank you so much for watching.